But first of all, I just want to say thanks for coming out tonight. Thank you to the Mount Holly Community Historical Museum for sponsoring me. That was great. For those that don't know me, and I think everyone here does, my name is Fay Enza. I live here in Mount Holly with my wife Bridget, and wherever she is, so there she is in the back, and my daughters Alice and Mary, who are both in college. We've been here 15 years this week, actually, which is pretty wild. It's important. The reason I do these presentations because it's important to me that people never forget what happened 18 years ago yesterday. Even though it's been 18 years, sometimes it's difficult for me to talk about certain things, so if I get a little choked up, you'll know why. Over the past several years, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of Vermonters, including people in this room who have told and shared stories of their direct involvement. You know, a lot of people think, oh, you know, this just involved people from New York, but it did involve people from everywhere. We had two people in Ludlow, one who lost their brother on Flight 93, the other one who lost their brother in the North Tower. So it is here, it affects everybody. It just doesn't affect, you know, if you were a first responder or you lived in New York, it affected a lot of people. So, the first thing I want to talk about, of course, is the World Trade Center. It's amazing, really. I was in my 18th year on the job in New York City, and I used to drive by this all the time. I was only in it once, and that was on in like the basement. In the basement, they actually had a shopping mall, and I went in there to meet another cop on a case. That was the only time I was ever in there. But it was quite the place, 110 stories each, 2 towers. It employed a lot of people. It was surrounded by 5 other buildings, 99 elevators, 21,000 windows. Each floor was an acre. Just think of that, you know, when we talk about acres around here, and just think of the massive size of these buildings. They were surrounded by 5 other buildings, like I mentioned, including the Marriott Hotel. There was a shopping mall and a subway station in the basement. This is a view here from the Hudson River. So you're looking at going the other way, the North Tower and the South Tower. These buildings that were in front of is the World Financial Center. It's where American Express, Bank of America, all the big banks, the stock exchange, some of the stock exchange buildings are there. So let's set the stage. Prior to 9/11. Bridget's laughing. So I was employed with the New York City Police Department. I was in my 18th year. My wife Bridget, who is also a retired New York City police detective, dressed our kids up in police uniforms and marched them in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Somebody took a picture of them, and the next day it was in newspapers all across the country. Not bad. In April, she retired from the police department to stay home. Thank you very much for the lights. That's really great. And she went back to school to pursue a career in baking, and we all know where that took her. I worked in Manhattan South Narcotics District. That is a part of the Organized Crime Control Bureau. At the time, I was doing a long-term investigation into the sale of ecstasy at these 2 nightclubs. So we worked Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights all night. So we'd go in late on like a Thursday and work all the way through to Friday, and then come back on Friday night, Saturday night, the same thing. And we were off Sundays and Mondays. And Tuesdays, we always went in for an early tour because that was the day we'd go to court and get us subpoenas and everything else. But on September 11th, on that Tuesday, I had joined the gym. So I told the guys, and I had a small team, I said, listen, do you mind? I want to come in and do a later tour that day because I have to go to a gym. And they were like, yeah, sure, that's great. It was good for them, they could sleep in. And so I got up Tuesday, September 11th, and I went to the gym. I got home about 8:45. And the kids were up, and they were watching Bear in the Big Blue House, or Teletubbies, or something like that. And Bridget was up having coffee, and the phone rang, and it was my sister-in-law saying, hey, my husband, who's a lieutenant in the fire department, just called. He's on his way to the World Trade Center. Some plane just crashed into one of the towers. So we're all like, what? You know, a plane crashing into the towers? But, you know, planes have hit buildings in New York before, and most of them were these small little Cessnas, and no one really knew, you know, what was going on. She's like, turn on the TV, it's all over the television. So we turned on the TV and watched, you know, as everyone else did that was watching the news that day, the fire coming, you know, the smoke coming out of the tower, and then we all watched in horror as the second plane hit the South Tower. Bridget and I sort of looked at each other and was like, how could that happen? How could two planes hit these massive buildings? I mean, how could that happen? And I just figured, well, you know what? I better pack a bag because I'm probably going to end up sleeping over that night. It's probably going to be a long day. So I packed a bag, got ready, and left, said my goodbyes, and headed out. Now, we lived 70 miles north of the city, so it was a bit of a ride for me. At that time in the morning, 9:30, there should be tons of traffic heading south, but it was strange. There was no one heading south. Everybody was heading north. So that was kind of weird. I don't really remember the trip down. It seemed, I don't know, I don't really remember too many of the details, but I do remember one thing. The sky was so blue. It was beautiful. And I was just like, there's no way anyone could not see these buildings, you know? When I got to the Henry Hudson Toll, they had closed the city by then. You couldn't get in unless you ID'd yourself. So I showed my shield, they let me down, I got to my office. By the time I got to my office, both buildings had already collapsed. My office was on 42nd Street and 10th Avenue. We get upstairs. I wear plain clothes, but that day it was like everyone's getting into uniform. Get in a uniform, and we don't know what we're going to do. Just get in a uniform, and we could grab gloves, and we had tons of entry equipment, sledgehammers, and crowbars, and all sorts of Halligans and everything. Threw them in the trunk of our car and headed down south. We had to go to a temporary headquarters they had set up on the West Side Highway at Houston Street, one of the old piers. We get there, and there were police officers that looked like these two, covered in dust. I mean, and a lot of them were guys that worked in my office who had worked the day tour. And they were all standing there, it was caked in their hair, they were washing their face off with water. And I go in, I see my boss, and he says, all right, this is the story. We're missing 500 police officers and 500 firefighters. And I was like, what? You know, that can't be. And like, we had no idea of what had happened. We hadn't watched TV. We didn't have the TV on at where I was at work. We had no clue what we were getting into. They had gone to like a, I don't know, Home Depot or whatever, and gotten these huge boxes of painter's masks, because that's all it was. Take some painter's masks, wear them, that'll be good enough for now. It took them 2 days to get us good masks. So they just said, head south as far as you can go, park your car, and do whatever you can do. That was it. Those were the directions. So we got down there, we drove as far as we could, and we parked on a street similar to the picture on the right. Debris everywhere, dust as high as my knees. It was almost like you were in a snowstorm, and you had to push your door open to get out. Everything covered like that. And we just walked our way until we got to Broadway. The streets looked like this. Some of these pictures I took, some I got off the internet. This is a famous photograph off the internet. But this is how everything looked. Covered in dust. Papers everywhere. And this was on some of the sidewalks. And this could be blocks, like 8 blocks away from the World Trade Center. So we got as far as we could. This is Building 7 right here. I am 1 block north. I did not take this picture, but that is what I looked at when I got there. It was like, think of the biggest junkyard, and I hate to refer to it as that, but think of the biggest junkyard you've ever seen in your whole life, and it's on fire. I am talking raging fires that are just burning out of control. Something like this. It was unbelievable to see. And here we are just standing on a corner. It was so weird. Stores that at this time of the day would be mobbed with people going to lunch and sitting down at restaurants, food everywhere, cash drawers open, money here and there. It was like abandoned. There wasn't a soul. The only people on the street were us. That was it. Everyone else was in the pile trying to rescue people that obviously was never going to happen. But every now and then you'd walk around, we'd walk our block, just, you know, we weren't really doing anything. Sometime around 5 o'clock, some fire chief came out and says, "Hey guys, I hate to tell you this, but you're a little close to building 7. It looks like it's going to fall down." He says, "Maybe you guys should move back." So we went back about a block, and about 5:30, the building collapsed. Now that was like a 48-story building. I can only imagine what the World Trade Centers were like when they collapsed. Watching this go down from around the corner, it was amazing. But this is where it was. This is where our post was. You couldn't even go further south than here. It was just so much debris. All these side streets were all just covered in debris. The West Side Highway, I'll show you pictures of that. Sometime around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I think it was, somebody came by with a cell phone. You know, this is pre-cell phones. We don't have everything like we have today. And I was able to call Bridget and say, "Hey, I'm alive." You know, that was like our only communication. We were on the post until 12:30 at night. They told us, "Go back to your command. You can't go home, and try and get some sleep and come back at 4:15. So we went back to our command. The interesting thing about going up to our command was the West Side Highway north of where we were was filled with hundreds of people out there with signs. I mean, this is like after midnight, flags. I mean, it was just great to see the whole world come out. We got back to the office and there were no beds left, so we broke up some boxes, put them on the floor and slept on the floor and in our clothes, and then got up and had to be back at work at 4:15. This is just sort of an idea of where we were each day. So on September 12th, they stuck us over by City Hall Park. It was interesting. I try to refer to it as it was a ticker tape in a blizzard. That's the ticker tape parade in a blizzard. That's probably the best way to explain it. Papers, everything hanging from trees, airplane parts all over the street. It was amazing. I mean, when you think about the buildings are over here, we were all the way over here, and you're looking at airplane parts, you can only imagine how much stuff was just blown out of the buildings when they hit. The National Guard arrived that day. But the scary thing is this building here, One Liberty Plaza, that was the NASDAQ building. And apparently when the South Tower collapsed, someone thought that the NASDAQ building's foundation moved. And so they set up these lasers on the building. And if the building started to move, the laser, they would send off some type of a siren. And so they told us, if you hear the siren, basically run for your life if you're near the NASDAQ building. So, yeah, this is actually the, yeah.
Could you go back to the map and point out Tower 1 and Tower 2?
Sure. Here's the North Tower, right there.
Okay.
Tower 1. Yeah, Tower 1, North Tower. This is Tower 2.
Okay.
This is the Marriott Hotel. So just so you know, these were the buildings that were around the World Trade Center. This was the plaza. This is where that sphere that you see was right in the middle. Over here was the Orthodox Church that got destroyed. Over here is the firehouse. Is right over here on this corner. There was so much debris around the firehouse, they actually had to go out through the roof to get out of their firehouse. So everything around here was impassable. All these roads around here were impassable. There was debris everywhere, and it spread all down south and up here. It was just everywhere. But so sometime around, I don't know what time, the alarm went off. This was the thing they gave us: evacuation warning signals. You know what you need to do. So the alarm went off, and you had National Guard, EMS, fire department, police officers thinking they're running for their lives because the building's going to collapse, and it turns out there was nothing wrong. The building was fine. But it was just something else that we needed to throw into the mix to make our day. This was something, this came out, they thought that first of all, that was the other thing. I mean, I didn't know that it was a terrorist attack, really, until later on. I had no knowledge of the Pentagon getting hit or other planes. We knew nothing about that. We didn't find out about that until we got back to our base that night. Or actually, I think maybe Bridget might have told me when I called that there had been other planes involved. But the next day, they gave us all these license plates because they thought they were actually like terrorists, like bombs and cars parked in the area. And it was just weird. You didn't know what you were. It didn't matter where you were. You didn't know what was going on. So that was that day. We stayed there until 9 o'clock at night. Finally got to go back to our base and take a shower. I got to sleep in a bed, which was nice for one night. And then, let's see, where are we? So then the next day, go back, all right. On the 13th, which was Thursday, we were over here on this end of the site, a little bit north. There was a big hotel here, and this was the place where emergency service is who, when the police need, when the public need help, they call the police. When the police need help, they call emergency service. They lost a lot of guys on 9/11, the emergency service unit. But these were the guys that were going. They had the listening devices. They'd crawl underneath the rubble, and they had these listening devices trying to hear anyone that might be trapped. So we were over at their temporary headquarters for the whole day. This was the site. This is a parking area that was right near their temporary headquarters. So this is over here. These are where the buildings were. All these cars are burned. They were all burned from either what was in the dust cloud when the buildings collapsed, fire that just went straight through and set all these cars on fire. It was weird, really crazy. This is another view of it looking towards. This is where the North Tower would have stood. These are the buildings on the edge. This is the phone company. On the other side of the phone company was Building 7. And this is the World Financial Center here.
Did they collapse too?
They did not. No, these buildings stayed. These buildings got severely damaged, but they stood. So this is the West Side Highway. If you've ever been down in Manhattan, the West Side Highway goes, this is south of Vesey Street. This is my team here. They're standing here we're at least 15 to 18 feet in the air. This is all rubble that's on top. This is what's left of the this is what's left of the South Tower. The North Tower is over here on this side. I didn't get that in the picture. But this is the way it was. This was probably a couple of days. We ended up doing a lot of security work. So we were, like I said, we were over at the ESU temporary headquarters being security for them. By now, some press had been able to come down. They didn't want anyone bothering these guys. They were out there doing a lot of work. So that's what we were. So we were doing a lot of security. And everyone else was searching, Everyone was doing the bucket brigade. They had thousands of people and firefighters in these long lines with all these big white buckets. And they dig up some stuff and pass it all the way down the line. And then there'd be a guy at the end, and they pour it onto a sifter, and they go through it and see what they could find. And they just did that forever, for days. But my guys wanted to search, and they didn't want us to search. And finally they said, okay, we'll let you search. So sometime, I don't know when, I think it was later, might have been later in the week, but right in this general area where we were, somewhere over in here, they gave the guy shovels and said, go ahead, start digging. So we weren't dressed to dig. We're wearing police uniforms. We got helmets on our heads. You know, we weren't ready for it, but it gave my team, like, they felt like they were actually doing something. They wanted to get involved. So they dug for 4 hours. And every time they'd get like a foot down, it was metal and all this stuff. They'd bring a cadaver dog over and they'd smell to see if they get a hit. And then you go back and you dig some more. It was a slow task. 6 hours of digging. And where were we? We were on top of a ladder fire truck that was completely buried in rubble. And that was just, we just couldn't believe it. I mean, your mind just doesn't understand that could really be, that you were on top of a ladder fire truck completely buried in rubble. But that's how it is, and that was the only day we got to search. But I think my guys felt good after that. I hope they did. Friday, September 14th, pouring rain. By now they had started to move in all the heavy equipment and they were clearing the roads. So you could actually access everything north of Vesey Street and west. It was the day President Bush came, and so, hey, we got the team, send the team down there so we can be secure. So we went down. The crazy thing though, it was raining so hard and you were in the mud and all the dirt, and we had regular shoes on, no boots. And I think it was Stanley Tool or something, came and dropped off like 2,000 pairs of boots. And you could go in and got a pair of boots and put them on. And so I had boots for the day. By now, all different sorts of people were coming. We had food trucks and all the help of the world was coming in to help us. Of course, you got to remember, September 11th was election day in New York State. So every politician in the world had to come down to show that they were camaraderie, you know, with the police and the fire and everything else. And everyone needed to have their picture taken with the police officers. So, you know, Paul, get your guys, stand up over here. Hillary Clinton wants to shake your hand. At that time, she was hated by the police for something that she had done. And, oh my God, it was the worst. And we had to stand there and actually shake our hand and have our picture taken with her. And I never even got a copy of the picture. But anyways, so that was Friday. We were, same thing. At this point, we had a little bit more luxury. We could walk around the site. It was just unbelievable. You couldn't believe the stuff. Blocks away, you could see fire escapes just chock full with paper. You know, think of all the stuff. And you know, by now I've been speaking to Bridget, and she had friends who would be calling up, hey, Paul's walking around there, down there. Do they see anyone? You know, by now they had pictures up of all the people who were missing. You know, we talk about an acre of a building, offices. I never saw a desk. I never saw a file cabinet. I never saw anything. If it was in that building, it was gone. There was nothing, you know. It's a remarkable feat that they found so many people. Yeah, it was an unbelievable sight. This is what's left of the Marriott Hotel. This is the South Tower. This is part of the South Tower, or it could be part of the North Tower that fell. This is the Deutsche Bank Trust building here. It got hit when the South Tower fell, and I'll talk about that in another slide. By now they're bringing in lights. They're working 24 hours a day, just trying to clear debris and find victims. It was something. All right, just another picture now. This is later on. This is the following week. The following week we did building searches. So all those buildings I showed you, we had to walk up to the top and then check every room all the way down. And so this is looking out of the World Financial Center, that's the hotel again, and what's left of the South Tower. And this is now this is the West Side Highway. The picture I showed you before, they started to clean it. This is north, looking north. Over here would have been Stuyvesant High School, which ended up being like a comfort zone for all the workers. This is Bessie Street here that goes across. Yeah, right down this way, down that street was the morgue, and that ended up being my post for the rest of the time I was there. It was a crazy place to be. So what would happen is noise, all sorts of noise, trucks moving back and forth, and big, bringing in these big loaders and everything else, and then all of a sudden, silence. And out would come an ATV carrying a sled, and if it was a police officer or firefighter, it'd be covered with a flag, and they'd bring it into the temporary morgue, and they would tag it, and then they bring it out, they put it in an ambulance, and the ambulance would take it to the morgue up at Belmont. So when that first started happening, when we were on post, everyone stops. So we said, all right, come on over, we'll do an honor guard. So it was me and my team, and we do an honor guard. By the time we finished, when that happened, we had hundreds of people standing in a line, saluting, and then, they'd be bringing other people too, not just firefighters and police officers. But it was good. It was something that I'm proud of being there. The good thing was, like I told you, by now, everyone was there. I mean, you had Salvation Army, you had every restaurant you could possibly think of down there serving food. If you needed a back massage, you'd go to the high school. There was someone there that, if you needed to talk to somebody, which was huge, talking to somebody. They had, you could go to the church, say a prayer, you could talk to a priest. There was so much there, so many people there to help us. Finally, Saturday, I got to go home. Been there a week. It was nice. So I went home for 2 days, and then I came back the following week, Tuesday. And I was assigned on the same street, Vesey and West. I was there for the rest of the time I was there. This is just looking down Vesey Street, heading towards Broadway. This is what's left of Building 7 right here. These are the other buildings on the corner. It was just, clearing stuff and just pulling stuff out. It just went on, it was non-stop. This is the World Financial Center. As you can see, there was some damage to it, and the windows were all blown out. All the firefighters that are going through the wreckage. I mean, this is the highway here. It's just covered with all this junk. All this metal and papers and asbestos, and it was just unbelievable. You never thought they would clean it up. I don't know how they ever finally did, but it took them a long time. Some of these photos are like, I took these photos, and it's just, you just look at the magnitude, the little people, all these little colors here are firefighters, and workers, and it's just such a huge pile of debris. This is inside the financial center looking out. This was part of our building searches. We had to go in and check all the buildings to make sure there was no victims inside. This is south of the center. So this is what's left of, this is where the church would have been, the Orthodox church. This was one of the walkways that went across the West Side Highway. If anyone's been down there, Bridget and I were just down there in May. They've restored this walkway. It's still here. The other one that was up near Vesey Street is gone. They didn't rebuild that one. But this is probably Friday. We were down south. I think this was for when the president came. This was an apartment building that was over here. So the buildings are over here. It's an apartment building. It even got damaged. This is inside looking out. You just don't realize how much, when those buildings fell and that cloud moved, how far it went and what happened with the explosion. This is just looking at the center again. As you can see, it got hit over here. It lost a lot of windows. That's the World Financial Center. Sometime in the second week, we were searching buildings over past Broadway. This is a hotel that, not a hotel, this is an office building that let us come up and have lunch in the cafeteria. And you could just look out. This was the Millennium Hotel, which was directly behind the North Tower. And it was all damaged in the front. But you could just see all the debris on top of the roofs. There's building 7 over there, just to give you an idea of where we are. This is that Deutsche Bank building. So that building got hit, seriously hit, so it had to be torn down. But the city, in its usual infinite wisdom, never got around to it. Too many lawsuits and everything else. But they left it there. They had it covered with like a scaffolding. Sometime, like 2 years later, I mean, it was there for a while. Like 2 years later, they shut the water off in it, and then they had a fire. And 2 firefighters died fighting that fire. So it just was insult to injury. This is it from a different angle. This is looking at it from Greenwich Street. You can see how it was severely damaged. Why they didn't take it down. It is now down. This is over on Greenwich Street. These are the two buildings that are over on the east side of the towers. These were 2 of the buildings on the side there that collapsed, were struck by the building when it fell. This is the church right over here, Trinity Church, St. Paul's Church. It's over here. This is what it looked like in the graveyard. All sorts of things hanging from the trees. So this was our building search. I don't know the exact location of this, but this was a clothing store that was 8 blocks from the Trade Center. The landing gear, part of the landing gear, went through the roof and went down 4 flights into the basement. We found this on a building search. It was scary. I mean, thank God no one was hurt. I guess the store was closed that day, or it wasn't opening or something, but it was wild. So we got back to our precinct, and the next week we had thousands of cards from kids all over the country sending all these great thank yous. We had them covering the walls. It was great. So I took one. I still have it with me from Danielle, whoever she is. It was really great. It was so great how the city came together, how the world came together after this. So this is St. Paul's Church. This is I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I guess this was. So I had to go back and take the same picture I took here, just to show the difference. This is the Freedom Tower here in the back. They're building it at the time.
Well,
So-
that one again, like the state of the
Oh,
Sorry.
sure. I'm in the way, yes. St. Paul's Church. This is when we went back. They were building the Freedom Tower here, and I wanted to go back and take a picture of the one I had taken on 2001. So then you get down to the guys you lost. John was an interesting fellow. He was a phys ed teacher, taught in a high school in the Bronx. Actually got his master's degree in teaching, and then decided, I think I'll become a cop. So he joined the police department, same time I did. I knew him. We actually worked together in the Bronx for a while. He ended up going to emergency service. He was in charge of the robot. He actually wrote the manual on how to use the robot. So when someone was barricaded, they send in the robot with a shotgun on the front, and the guy comes out one way or another. He also could climb bridges. He had some great pictures of him up on top of the Verrazano Bridge, and, you know, those guys do all that crazy stuff. But he was a really great guy, and he was going into the Marriott Hotel to search for occupants with his sergeant when the South Tower fell, and he was killed. The other guy, Sergio was an undercover in our office. He worked for the NYPD for 8 years, and then he decided, I want to be a firefighter. So he left the police department and he became a firefighter. The crazy thing is that we saw him the week before 9/11. He came back to the office to visit, and he said, I can't stand being a firefighter. He says, I never worked so hard in my life. So he says, I want to come back. But anyways, they never found him. He was a big soccer player. He was from Venezuela. He actually played on the national team in Venezuela. But another good guy. Morris Smith, Bridget knew her. Her and her partner, Robert Fazio, died. This picture was in the Daily News. Here she is helping a gentleman out of the World Trade Center. Her and her partner were noted that they helped so many people get out of the buildings. This was her shield. Here, she was recovered in March.
Where was she when?
I don't know where she was. She was in one of the towers when they fell. So then it brings us back to the 9/11 related illnesses. You know, it's still going on. These numbers have changed. I updated this 2 days ago. Yesterday we had 2 more NYPD cops die. So we're up to 243 that have died since 9/11, 204 members from the FDNY. These are people that Bridget and I know, guys that we work with that have died, or women as well that have died since 9/11. It's unbelievable the amount of people. They're dying from brain cancers, all sorts of respiratory diseases, cancers. It's just terrible. I know probably most of you are familiar with Louis Alvarez, who just went down and testified in front of Congress. They passed the bill, they extended it, which is great. This guy here, Jerry Bayrott, he was a sergeant in the detective squad. He was down there helping people escape. When the building fell, the actual wind from the thing threw him like 30 feet. He ended up breaking both his legs, but he ended up dying of cancer. So these people are all involved, and it's just a shame. It's why I do this presentation, that we have to remember these people that are continuing to pass away. So, if you haven't been to the museum, this is a place you need to go. It is unbelievable. So this is inside the museum at the World Trade Center now. This is the Slurry Wall. So they built this wall. When they built the trade centers back in 1972, they needed a wall that would keep the Hudson River from coming into the site. So this is what they built. So the museum is actually in the sub-basement of what would have been the North Tower. I went there on a Tuesday night. There had to have been 1,500 people in there. You'd swear you were in a church. There wasn't one person talking. There aren't, this is the only place in the whole museum that you can take a picture. Video and everything else is not allowed. You can't take any pictures deep when you get deeper into the museum. But it is the whole story. I mean, it's everything. It's about, it's from the terrorists all the way up. It's unbelievable. You really got to go and see it. These are the reflecting pools. This is the museum. Here, that's the top of it. 2 reflecting pools, both where the buildings would have stood. It's in their footprints. Around the edge are the names of all who died there. So here's my friend John and Maura. They're in no real particular order, but they're all around the pools. It's really something to see. Here you see, these are the financial centers behind me. Here's the Freedom Tower. If you're skittish as far as heights go, you might not want to visit that, but the elevator ride, it's cool. It's like 6 seconds and you're up 100-something stories. But it's unbelievable views. But it's really a beautiful place. Here's the financial centers again. This is the building they built in, building 7 used to be. This is the train station. This is a big mall now. It's really, they really fixed up the area really nice. These were taken several years ago, but it's been changed. They're starting to rebuild the Orthodox Church. Things are really changing. This is what you see when you walk in the museum. This no day shall erase you from the memory of time. The blue tiles they put out to artists around the world to match the color of the sky that they had. So that's what you see when you walk in. Just a reminder, 2,753 people were killed on that day. 343 firefighters, 71 law enforcement, and 8 EMTs. And that's all I have for you tonight. I know I talked a lot. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, Deutsche, was that where they had the mold?
Yes.
Yes. That's where
Had the what?
it was mold.
Mold.
Oh.
That's why they wouldn't want to take it down, and they didn't know how to take it down, and then they shut the water off, and they had fire. And
Well, 2 of our Mount Holly Belmont neighbors lived in one of the apartment buildings near there, and I think they were kept out for quite a while.
yeah, but everything south of Houston Street was shut. If you lived there, you had to find somewhere else to go. You weren't allowed to come in. After like the 2nd or 3rd week, they started doing escorts, where they escort people in if they needed to get something from their apartments. But you just didn't want to be down there. Everything you touched was dust. Something I didn't mention is, like around the 3rd day, a couple of guys from the NYPD who were chefs went into one of the hotels that was closed and started cooking food for everybody, all the rescue workers. And it wasn't until like the end of the day that finally someone came in and said, "You can't be doing this. Everything is covered in dust. Everything." I mean, if the door or window was open, it went in, and it was on everything. And here we are eating food that's covered in all this stuff. So, but it was a great, something to try. But that dust went everywhere, and the fires burned forever. I mean, they burned the whole time I was there. They couldn't put them out. They were deep in the mess, in the entangled metal, and just think of all the paper that was in that building that was on fire. I mean, I feel very fortunate that I was only there for 2 weeks. Some of the guys that work with me were there for several months and then had to go to the Fresh Kills landfill, where they actually stood on a conveyor belt and just had pieces of debris come by, and they had to pick things out, and it was. I'm very happy. I'm happy that I joined the gym, that I went in late that day, that we didn't go in early, because if we had gone in early, we would have been there. That's all there is to it, and who knows what would have happened. I mean, I'm just happy. Yeah, it's destiny, and there are so many stories like that. You know, I was just reading one the other day where a guy was on his way to the towers, and he had to drop off something for dry cleaning, and just as he paid the bill, the plane hit, and everyone was, he just was like, "What was that?" And he had been there in '93 or whatever for the bombing, and he just said, "I'm out of here," and he left. You know, if he hadn't stopped for the coat, he had gone to his office, he might not have made it. There's so many of those different stories around. Like I said, I'm very happy that I was there, and I did what I could as a first responder, but I'm glad I was only there for 2 weeks. It was enough.
Didn't they give the people that were working, like you guys, and you have respirators?
It took 2 days. 2 days for them to get masks. Yeah, that were any good, you know. But it was no like replacements. It isn't like, so after being in that in that air for a couple of days. It was all covered in,
Oh,
in
yeah.
stuff, and, you know, no one was there giving you a new one. That's what you had, you know, and like I said, most of us wore the same clothes for like 3 or 4 days. You know, we just didn't have time to go home, and we didn't have anything to change into. Like I said, I was happy that they brought the boots, at least I could change my shoes. But, yeah, it was, you know, by the first weekend, like I said, everyone was coming there. People were bringing all sorts of things, so it helped. But before that, it was fend for yourself, basically.
Paul, how long did it take the government to finally admit that, oh, there might be some medical problems with the people who work there? Didn't it take quite a while?
It did, yeah, it did. I mean, when you think of it, I mean, people should have known that, you know, between jet fuel and asbestos and everything,
Yes.
all the different chemicals that we were breathing in, all this stuff, but you're there to do your job, that's it, you know? Anyways, thank you.
Thank you.